I'm Becky. I recently graduated from university and moved to a neighboring state for a job opportunity. For now, I had to rent a small apartment in a not-so-great area. The only one living with me is my dog, a corgi named Mikey, who was a gift from my ex-boyfriend Jake. Our relationship started in our third year of university. I thought our love was eternal, but it turned out differently. At first, Jake seemed sweet and caring. He would always meet me after classes and walk me home, showing interest in everything related to me, how I like to spend my time, what I enjoy, my interests, tastes, and lifestyle. He constantly asked where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, and when we could meet. Naively, I saw this as attentiveness and care. After a while, it became exhausting. I grew tired of his constant control and possessiveness. Whenever I wanted to be alone or hang out with friends, he would start calling and messaging me, saying how much he missed me. When I tried to confront this behavior, Jake changed. He became aggressive and constantly accused me of not doing enough for our relationship. He questioned my feelings and even accused me of cheating. I desperately wanted to improve the situation, but my efforts were in vain. After 2 years together, right after graduating, I couldn't take it anymore, and we broke up. My heart was shattered. This relationship brought me a lot of pain. Jake lingered in my thoughts. I tried to forget him, to push his image out of my mind, but he returned like a ghost, reminding me of the hurt he caused. I felt like I would never be able to live my life again. With these heavy thoughts, I settled into my new apartment and began building my career. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. I had no idea that Jake wasn't just occupying my thoughts. At that very moment, he was watching me closely. He knew everything about me and was preparing to strike at my heart one last time. It all began when I started noticing strange things around me. It felt like everything was changing, and I was at the center of some bizarre conspiracy. It started with random coincidences that seemed like mere accidents, but gradually they became too frequent and strange to ignore. As soon as I voiced some of my thoughts, I would receive immediate responses. I lost a pen from my desk, and that evening, I found it in my apartment, even though I didn't have a habit of bringing things home from work. I mentioned to a friend over video chat that I was going to the movies. That same day, my browser was open to the page advertising the film I wanted to see. I realized I was being followed. Over time, I began to feel his gaze on me and hear footsteps behind me. I could clearly sense a strange presence, even when I was alone at home. It was so terrifying that I started sleeping poorly and jumped at every little sound. Determined to regain control, I tried to make sense of the situation. As I began to explore my surroundings, I attentively listened to everything happening around me. Gradually, I realized that it was far more complicated than it had seemed at first, but I was ready for anything. Then I started keeping a diary. I wrote down all my fears and suspicions, the moments when I thought I saw or felt his presence. Slowly, I began to immerse myself in a world of paranoia and fear. My entries became increasingly detailed, amplifying the maddening terror within me. With each new word, each phrase, I realized that these were not just my fantasies. He was truly nearby, watching me, infiltrating my life uninvited. This knowledge filled me with horror and anxiety, turning every moment of existence into a real nightmare. My life had become an endless chase, where I tried to find refuge from this torment. But gradually I came to understand that it was futile. My isolation from others only heightened my vulnerability to him. Every rustle, every creak made me tremble in anticipation of his next move. Day after day, I faced an unknown threat that crept up on me silently. And then he revealed himself. Coming home from work, I found a frightened Mikey in my apartment. He was wearing the collar I had forgotten at Jake's when I left him. The laptop in the room was on, and a notepad was open with the typed phrase, "I miss you." Terrified, I decided to take action and protect myself. In desperation and fear, I reached out to the police, hoping for their support and protection. However, the refusal from law enforcement only exacerbated my situation. The police's words that they needed evidence to intervene sounded like a verdict. I realized that my observations and suspicions, although real to me, could not serve as adequate grounds for police action. Proving that Jake had broken into my apartment seemed impossible. There were no cameras in our building, and Jake's fingerprints on the keyboard had been there long before our breakup. Living in constant fear and anticipating horror has turned me into a paranoid person. I have no one to turn to. My parents are gone, and my friends are in another city. The police don't believe me. I felt like a cornered victim. Perhaps this state is what gave me strength. When you're alone and have nothing to lose, all that's left is to resist until the end. That evening, as usual, I was walking home from work. It was already quite late, and the deserted streets repelled me with their emptiness, stirring anxiety within me. I walked briskly on the damp pavement. It had rained a few hours earlier. And then I heard him. He was following me, step by step, practically silently. But my acute sense of hearing, fueled by constant fear, and the puddles on the road betrayed him. I involuntarily quickened my pace. He picked up speed as well. Run! As fast as you can. Suddenly breaking into a run, I tried to get away. He immediately began to chase me. My heart was pounding wildly, and I ran without looking back. However, he was faster. Jake caught up with me fairly quickly, grabbed me, and dragged me into the nearest alley. "You've brought me too many problems," he said, pulling out a knife. "Today, I'm going to break your heart for good." Jake raised the knife, and then something snapped inside me. I screamed piercingly and began to struggle fiercely. Not expecting such resistance, he tried to hold me tighter, but I managed to break free from his grip. After everything I had been through, all the stalking and torment, I had accumulated so much anger, and finally I let it all out. Jake bore the brunt of it. I lunged at him, disregarding my safety and the knife in his hand. I struck him with all my might, losing control and not feeling any pity for him. Curses spilled from my lips as my blows grew fiercer. Jake couldn't handle my rage. Eventually, I stopped. Fearing he would get up, I fled again. I only came to my senses at the police station, where I had run for help. After giving my statement, I stayed there until morning. I only went home after ensuring that Jake had been arrested. After his capture, I felt an indescribable relief. But even with the threat eliminated, fear still held me in its embrace. I understood that his shadow would always loom in my subconscious, causing anxiety. My name is Jake. I am a third-year university student studying programming. Recently, we had a party that invited not only the guys from my course, but also their friends. On that day, I didn't feel like going. I had a sense that it would end badly. In the shadow of night, as the moon barely illuminated the street, I was making my way home. The party where I met Barbara was still ringing in my ears like a distant hum. I noticed her right away, the girl with blue eyes and a mysterious smile. I had no idea how much this encounter would change my life. At first, everything was innocent. Barbara sent a friend request on social media. We started to message each other occasionally. I wasn't particularly captivated by her, though I didn't mind her company. The thing is, I had a girlfriend, and everyone who knew us, including those at the party, was aware of that. When I mentioned it, Barbara didn't react to the news at all. I thought she wasn't interested in pursuing anything further, and our communication wouldn't go beyond friendship. How wrong I was. Over time, Barbara began to show more interest in me. She started commenting on every one of my photos on social media, leaving hearts on my posts. Of course, I wasn't thrilled about this, but I tried to ignore her attention. At that time, I had no idea what this girl was capable of. Gradually, her messages became increasingly intrusive. She sent lengthy messages where she explicitly expressed her feelings and her desire to be close to me. I continued to try to ignore her quirks, hoping she would just fade away. But that only fueled her, making her act even more aggressively and decisively. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Barbara. Her voice trembled with emotion, begging me to talk. I had no idea what we could discuss, since I had already said everything. But Barbara wouldn't give up. She cried, pleaded not to push her away, swearing that everything would be all right between us. I ended the call, feeling a heavy sense of anxiety, but the worst was yet to come. After that call, Barbara suddenly changed her tactics. No longer was she a heartbroken, crying girl. Now she was a malicious, cunning fury. She began to threaten my family, sending terrifying messages and making calls. Each time she used different numbers and anonymous accounts. It was impossible to trace her. One evening, when my girlfriend was home alone late at night, someone knocked on the door. When she opened it, she found a small cardboard box. Opening it with surprise, she shrieked in horror. Inside was a doll's head, torn off and smeared with red paint. She was a blonde too. Alongside it was a note that read, "Next time, it will be your head." I was horrified. We immediately called the police. However, the investigation yielded no results. There were no fingerprints on the package, and the cameras didn't capture anything since we hadn't thought to save the footage. I tried to file a report against Barbara to have her prohibited from approaching us, but it was all in vain. My girlfriend and I were in despair. In the end, we decided to get tricky. I told Barbara that I would be willing to meet and talk. We agreed to do it at midnight on neutral territory, where there were no people. My girlfriend lurked in the bushes with her cell phone at the ready. We decided to make a video of Barbara threatening me. At exactly midnight, the stalker came to the meeting place. I again made an attempt to talk to her calmly, but Barbara was in no mood for rejection. She resolutely pulled out a gun and pointed it at me. Out of surprise, I almost thwarted our plan. Before the meeting, she and I had agreed that we would go through with it, even if either of us was in danger. I could feel her fear and excitement for me, but I mentally begged her not to snap and jump out of the bushes. I also hoped she'd think to call the police. While I talked to Barbara, I tried to stall for time, but she had other plans. At some point, she voiced that she knew everything, that she'd been following us and had seen my girlfriend. I was scared, but I decided not to show it. I told her she was lying and I'd come alone. At this, Barbara suddenly pointed the gun toward the bushes and fired. At that very moment, a siren sounded and a police car appeared from behind the trees. Barbara was trapped. She put the gun to her temple and fired. Fortunately, there was only one bullet. Apparently, she didn't know that when she stole the gun from her father's desk. Barbara went to jail. My girlfriend's alive. The bullet was a tangential hit to the shoulder. She got off with a minor scratch. I'm still terrified that the bullet could have hit her vital organs. I don't visit Barbara so she doesn't think about me, but her words stick in my mind forever. As she was being led out of the courtroom, she said, "I won't miss next time. My name is Marianne. This story began 10 years ago. I was working as a PR manager at the time, promoting brands and companies. Living in San Francisco, I was enjoying life and actively building my career. The world seemed so friendly before she came into my life. I was 24 years old when Gina first wrote, introducing herself as the owner of a small business she had inherited and asking for help with promotion. I responded politely, offering her my contacts in the field. But soon things began to take a strange turn. Gina began to persistently ask for meetings, ignoring my explanations that this service did not require a personal presence. My inner voice whispered to me that something was wrong, but I tried to be supportive and helpful. However, when it began to interfere with every aspect of my life, everything changed. Life became a nightmare that I couldn't stop. It was psychological abuse, prolonged and exhausting. Anyone could have been in that situation. Gina was like a spider wrapped around me with her web of intrusive calls, messages, and emails. First, it was messages asking for lunch, then career advice, then asking for help in my personal life. She knew all my contacts, all my weaknesses and fears. She was everywhere, in my inbox, on social media, in the cafes where I like to hang out. Like a ghost, she haunted me, making me doubt my strength, my decisions. One day, there was an incident that made me feel particularly vulnerable. Gina sneaked into the entryway of my building, posing as a courier, and with a can of spray paint began smearing paint on my apartment door and on my bicycle parked on the floor. It was a shock to me, and I realized I had to be more careful and scrutinize who I let in. My life became a living hell. I was afraid of phone calls, afraid to open the mail, afraid to leave the house. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped working. All my thoughts were preoccupied with one thing: how to get rid of this woman. I tried ignoring her, blocking her numbers, changing email addresses, but she still found me. It was like she knew all my moves ahead of time. One day, after another endless series of messages, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I packed up my things and left San Francisco. I thought I could get away from Gina that way, but that was very naive. She knew where I was staying, and she started stalking me again. She tried to meddle in my relationships with my friends and coworkers by scheming and spreading gossip, threatened my family, saying she could hurt them. I finally snapped and asked her what she wanted from me. Then she gave me an ultimatum. Either I would make her business thrive, or she would make my life unbearable. I couldn't take it anymore. I was exhausted, broken, tired of this endless harassment. I decided to go to the police, but they just brushed me off. There's no evidence, they said. It's just an annoying woman. As I encountered more and more threats and hateful messages, I wondered what makes people so aggressive online. Why can words be so venomous when face-to-face we behave completely differently? There is an unfathomable psychology lurking in the world of virtual connections and inner demons that can lash out through the keyboard keys. I didn't know what to do. I was alone against this invisible enemy. There was only one hope left. I decided to write the whole story. I wanted the world to know what was happening, to make people realize how terrible it can be to be a victim of psychological abuse. I wanted to let everyone know that abuse can be not only physical, but also emotional, and it can destroy lives. The story resonated with the reader. I knew how to spin it competently and make people sympathize. Gina got a lot of abuse from people who cared. Eventually, the harassment stopped. She formally apologized and disappeared from my life. I know my story is no exception. Many people face psychological abuse, but they can't always talk about it. I want my story to be a wake-up call. I want people to think about how they can help victims of psychological abuse, how they can stop this nightmare. And I want my story to give hope to those who are going through this hell right now, so that they know that they are not alone.